Goldie Hawn reveals the 5 actors she hates more than anyone. America's sweetheart, the golden girl of comedy, that infectious laugh and sunny personality that's charmed audiences for over 5 decades. Goldie Hawn seems like the kind of person who wouldn't have an enemy in the world, but behind that dazzling smile and bubbly persona lies something few fans know about: a steely resolve and an unwavering standard for how people should behave, especially in Hollywood. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 5 shocking feuds between Goldie and some of the biggest male stars in the industry. These aren't just minor disagreements or tabloid fabrications. These are deep-seated resentments built on troubling behavior, painful set experiences, and fundamental clashes of personality that Goldie has privately discussed for years. And what's most surprising, the Golden Girl's ability to maintain her public image while harboring these strong feelings about some of Hollywood's most powerful men. The contrast between her sunny public persona and these private grievances reveals a far more complex woman than most fans ever realized. You might be wondering how someone as universally loved as Goldie Hawn could have such intense negative feelings toward other major stars. Isn't Hollywood just one big happy family? Hardly. The reality of filmmaking puts enormous pressure on relationships, forcing people with wildly different temperaments to work together in high-stress situations for months at a time. And Goldie, despite her cheerful image, has always been something else behind the scenes, a consummate professional with little patience for difficult behavior from her colleagues. Let's examine the 5 men who managed to get on the wrong side of Hollywood's Golden Girl, and why their conflicts reveal so much about the true power dynamics of the entertainment industry.
There are ways to practice religion. This, of course, wouldn't be one of them.
1. Chevy Chase, the co-star who tested her limits. On screen, they had undeniable chemistry. Foul Play, released in 1978, showcased the comedic talents of both Goldie Hawn and Chevy Chase at the height of their powers. Their timing was perfect, their rapport seemed genuine, and audiences fell in love with them as a duo. The film was a massive hit, grossing over $50 million. Impressive numbers for the late 1970s, and critics praised the pair's on-screen connection. But what was happening when the cameras weren't rolling tells a completely different story. According to multiple sources close to Goldie, working with Chevy Chase was one of the most challenging experiences of her career. The problem started almost immediately with Chase's punctuality, or rather, his lack thereof. The former Saturday Night Live star reportedly made a habit of arriving late to set, sometimes keeping the entire production waiting for hours. For someone like Goldie, who prided herself on professionalism and preparedness, this wasn't just annoying, it was downright disrespectful. Then there was Chase's ego. By 1978, he had already established himself as one of comedy's biggest stars. His transition from SNL to movies had been remarkably successful, and Foul Play came on the heels of his hit film, Oh, Heavenly Dog. This success, according to those who worked with him, had given Chase an inflated sense of his own importance, and it showed in his treatment of others on set. Chevy would constantly needle Goldie between takes, revealed a crew member who worked on Foul Play, and requested anonymity. He'd critique her line readings, or suggest she try different approaches, even though she was already an Oscar winner and he was still relatively new to film acting. It created this weird tension that everyone could feel. What made the situation particularly difficult was that Chase's behavior wasn't consistently problematic. He could be charming, funny, and engaging one moment, then dismissive and condescending the next. This unpredictability made it nearly impossible for Goldie to establish a comfortable working relationship with him. The breaking point allegedly came during the filming of a particularly challenging comedic sequence. After multiple takes, director Colin Higgins was satisfied with their performance and ready to move on. Chase, however, loudly insisted they do another take, implying that Goldie had missed some of the comedy beats. According to witnesses, Goldie maintained her composure in the moment, but was later overheard telling her longtime agent, "I love the character, but not the man." Years later, when asked about potential future collaborations with Chase, Goldie was diplomatic but firm. Some people just have different approaches to their work. Chevy is tremendously talented. His comic timing is perfect. But sometimes perfect timing isn't everything if you're not aware of anyone else in the room. What makes this feud particularly interesting is how successfully both stars have kept it under wraps. They've appeared at industry events together, exchanged pleasantries, and never publicly criticized each other. But behind closed doors, Goldie has reportedly used her considerable industry influence to ensure their paths rarely cross professionally. Their conflict represents a classic Hollywood dynamic, the clash between raw talent and professional courtesy, between being good at your job and being good to work with. And for Goldie Hawn, that distinction has always been crystal clear.
Do you mind if we finish talking about Elizabeth Warren and Hillary Clinton?
Elizabeth Warren?
Yeah.
Get to
Bill Murray, the star she refused to work with. Unlike her history with Chevy Chase, Goldie Hawn and Bill Murray never actually worked together on a film, and according to industry insiders, that was very much by Goldie's design. Throughout the 1980s and early 1990s, Murray and Hawn were two of comedy's biggest draws. Their pairing would have seemed natural for studio executives looking to create box office magic. In fact, they were reportedly considered for at least 3 major projects together during this period. Each time, negotiations advanced to serious stages before Goldie ultimately passed on the opportunity. Why would one of Hollywood's most successful actresses repeatedly turn down chances to work with one of its biggest male stars? The answer, according to those close to Goldie, lies in what she had heard about Murray's on-set behavior, particularly his treatment of women. Goldie does her homework, explained a longtime friend of the actress. Before signing on to any project, she talks to people who've worked with her potential co-stars. What she heard about Bill Murray set off major alarm bells. The reports that allegedly concerned Goldie centered around Murray's behavior during the filming of What About Bob in 1991. The comedy, which co-starred Richard Dreyfuss, was notoriously troubled, with well-documented tensions between Murray and director Frank Oz. But what really caught Goldie's attention were stories about how Murray's erratic behavior affected female members of the crew. Several women who worked on What About Bob described Murray as having wild mood swings, being charming and collaborative one minute and coldly dismissive the next. There were reports of him ignoring female crew members' input, talking over women in meetings, and occasionally making uncomfortable comments that walked the line between joke and insult. One particularly troubling incident allegedly occurred when a female production assistant made a minor scheduling error. According to witnesses, Murray berated her so severely in front of the entire crew that she was in tears. When another woman stepped in to defend her colleague, Murray reportedly turned his anger on her as well. When these stories reached Goldie through her industry connections, she allegedly told her agent, "I don't do bullies. Bill might be charming until the cameras stop rolling, but that's not enough." What makes Goldie's stance particularly noteworthy is that it came long before the Me Too movement brought widespread attention to power dynamics in Hollywood. At a time when many in the industry were willing to overlook difficult behavior from male stars, Goldie was quietly taking a stand. "She's always been ahead of her time that way," said a director who has worked with Hawn multiple times. Goldie understood her own value and the power she had to choose her collaborators carefully. She never needed to make a public statement. She just quietly declined projects that would put her in situations she considered unhealthy. In the years since, Murray's reputation for difficult behavior has become more widely known. Conflicts with directors like Harold Ramis and actors like Lucy Liu have made headlines. More recently, production on the film Being Mortal was suspended in 2022 due to a complaint about Murray's on-set behavior. For her part, Goldie has maintained a diplomatic silence about Murray in public, never directly criticizing him in interviews. When asked in a 2018 conversation why she and Murray had never worked together despite being comedy contemporaries, she simply smiled and said, "Sometimes the right project just doesn't come along." Those who know her well, however, understand exactly what she meant.
This is my dog. Around me.
3. Donald Sutherland, the intellectual who crossed a line. Donald Sutherland's reputation as one of the finest actors of his generation is well earned, with performances ranging from MASH to Ordinary People to The Hunger Games. He's demonstrated remarkable range and depth throughout his career. But according to those in Goldie Hawn's circle, his artistic brilliance comes with a personality that Goldie found impossible to tolerate. Not because of how he treated her, but because of how she witnessed him treating another actress. The story begins in the 1970s, when Sutherland was working on a film with actress Jill Clayburgh. While Goldie wasn't involved in the production, she was close friends with Clayburgh and frequently visited her on set. What she allegedly observed during these visits left a lasting impression. Donald had this way of making people feel intellectually inferior, recalled a makeup artist who worked on the production. He would quote obscure literature or philosophy, then look slightly disappointed when someone didn't catch his references. With men, it was annoying. With women, it often felt deliberately belittling. According to sources, Clayburgh became a particular target for this behavior. As a Yale graduate with a formidable intellect herself, she initially engaged with Sutherland's high-minded discussions between takes. But when she challenged some of his opinions or offered different interpretations, witnesses say his demeanor would change dramatically. He would get this look, said the makeup artist, this cold, dismissive expression, and he would talk over her or subtly mock her points. It was uncomfortable to watch because it was so clearly about putting her in her place. On one particularly difficult day of shooting, Sutherland allegedly criticized Clayburgh's interpretation of a scene in front of the entire crew, suggesting her approach was fundamentally missing the existential underpinnings of the character. The public dressing down reportedly left Clayburgh shaken and undermined her confidence for the remainder of the shoot. When Goldie witnessed this pattern of behavior, she was reportedly furious. After one especially tense day on set, she and Clayburgh went out to dinner, where Goldie allegedly told her friend, "That man has the emotional warmth of a marble statue. I don't care how talented he is, no one deserves to be treated that way." True to her word, Goldie made what appears to be a conscious decision to never work with Sutherland, despite multiple opportunities that arose over the years. In the early 1980s, they were both considered for leading roles in the same romantic comedy, but Goldie withdrew from consideration when Sutherland's involvement was confirmed. What's particularly interesting about Goldie's reaction is that Sutherland never directly mistreated her. Her decision was based entirely on what she observed of his treatment of another woman, a friend she felt compelled to stand up for. "That's classic Goldie," said a longtime associate. "She's always been protective of the people she cares about, especially other women in the industry. She saw how Donald's behavior affected Jill's confidence, and she wasn't going to let that slide, even if it meant passing on potentially great roles." The feud, if it can be called that, has remained largely one-sided and private. Sutherland has never publicly commented on Goldie or any tension between them. He may not even be aware of her feelings. But in Hollywood circles, it's well understood that Goldie Hawn and Donald Sutherland occupy very different planets, and she prefers to keep it that way.
To be or not to be, that is the question.
4. Mel Gibson, The Bridge Too Far. By the early 2000s, Goldie Hawn had established herself as not just a beloved actress, but a significant power player in Hollywood. After decades of successful films, she had earned the luxury of being extremely selective about her projects and co-stars. This was the context in which she reportedly made one of her most definitive stands, refusing to work with Mel Gibson under any circumstances. The roots of Goldie's issues with Gibson appear to be ideological rather than personal. Unlike her conflicts with Chevy Chase or her concerns about Bill Murray, her stance on Gibson wasn't based on direct interactions or even secondhand accounts of his on-set behavior. Instead, it was his public controversies and documented statements that allegedly led Goldie to draw a hard line. The breaking point came in the mid-2000s, following Gibson's 2006 arrest for driving under the influence, during which he made anti-Semitic remarks to the arresting officer. These comments, which became public when the arrest report was leaked, created a firestorm in Hollywood and beyond. For Goldie, whose father was descended from Jewish immigrants, these remarks weren't just offensive, they were deeply personal. Though she has never been particularly vocal about her Jewish heritage in public, those close to her say it's an important part of her identity. When the news about Gibson broke, Goldie was genuinely shocked and hurt, said a friend who has known the actress for decades. She couldn't reconcile the talented filmmaker with someone who could harbor those kinds of views. The situation became directly relevant to Goldie's career in 2007, when a major studio was putting together a romantic comedy aimed at older audiences. Both Goldie and Gibson were on the shortlist for the leading roles. Despite the project offering a substantial paycheck and a script Goldie had expressed interest in, she reportedly made her position clear. She would not participate if Gibson was cast. "It wasn't an ultimatum delivered in anger," explained someone familiar with the negotiations. She simply informed her representatives that she wasn't comfortable with the pairing and would need to pass if the studio went in that direction. What made Goldie's stance particularly notable was that it came at a time when many in Hollywood were still willing to work with Gibson despite the controversy. His directorial effort, Apocalypto, was released in December 2006, just months after his arrest, and still performed respectably at the box office. Many industry figures suggested that his comments, while unacceptable, were made under the influence of alcohol and didn't reflect his true character. Goldie, however, wasn't persuaded by these arguments. When asked by a close friend whether she believed in giving second chances, she reportedly said, "Forgiveness is spiritual, but he never asked for it. There's a difference between a mistake and a revelation of character." In the years that followed, Goldie maintained her distance from Gibson, both professionally and socially. At industry events where both were present, observers noted that she politely but firmly kept her distance. There were no public confrontations, no dramatic scenes, just a quiet, unwavering commitment to her principles. This approach typifies Goldie's handling of her industry relationships. Throughout her career, she has rarely engaged in public feuds or spoken negatively about colleagues to the press. Instead, she has exercised her power through choices, deciding who she works with, which projects she supports, and where she directs her considerable industry influence. In this way, Goldie's stance on Gibson reveals something important about her character. Behind the bubbly laugh and approachable persona is a woman of deep conviction who is willing to take principled stands, even when they might come at a professional cost.
Stop this nonsense! Get over the wire! Immediately! Okay. You stay there! Out of the way.
5. Steve McQueen, the brief encounter that left a lasting impression. Some feuds in Hollywood develop over years of difficult collaboration. Others form in an instant, a single interaction that tells one person everything they need to know about another. According to those close to Goldie Hawn, her strong feelings about Steve McQueen fall into the latter category. In the late 1970s, Goldie was riding high on a string of successes, including Shampoo and Foul Play. Her production team was actively looking for her next project and had identified a script they thought would be perfect, an action comedy